All right, so get this. We're diving into the Middle East car market today. And honestly, it's a total curveball.
Yeah?
We got this interview with a regional manager from Geely, one of China's biggest car companies, talking about their push into the region.
Interesting.
And it's not all about electric vehicles like you might think.
Really? That's pretty surprising, you'd think. With all the oil wealth they have, they'd be all in on EVs.
Right. So this interview paints a really different picture.
Yeah, so what are they saying?
Well, the expert calls the Middle East a fully competitive market for all engine types.
Okay, what does that even mean?
So first off, there's a flat 5% import tariff on all cars, no matter what engine they have.
Oh, wow, so no special breaks for EVs or hybrids like a lot of other countries are doing to try to go green.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that makes combustion engines, the gas guzzlers, still super competitive on price.
So it's a level playing field for all car types.
Yeah. But is that the only reason they're still so dominant in the Middle East?
No, not at all. I mean, a lot of it has to do with cultural factors, too.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, think about it. Public transportation isn't as developed in a lot of areas there, so people really rely on their own cars.
That's true.
And gas prices have historically been so much lower than in Europe or Asia,
Yeah.
so there's not really that same pressure to switch to electric.
So it's like the whole setup, and even people's mindsets are still geared toward those traditional cars.
Absolutely.
But what about younger people? You'd think they'd be all about the latest tech and, eco-friendly options.
Well, and that's where things get even more interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
The expert actually says Chinese brands are gaining some traction, especially with the younger crowd and women.
Huh. And that's just because they're more affordable.
Right. It's more than that.
So what's their secret?
They're focusing on smaller, fuel-efficient cars that are packed with technology. Like advanced infotainment systems, connectivity, voice control, all that stuff that really appeals to a tech-savvy generation.
So practical, but with that fun, modern vibe.
Yeah.
Very clever.
Yeah.
But what about pure EVs? Are they just not catching on at all?
Well, the expert is actually really skeptical about pure EVs in the Middle East, and for good reason.
Oh, really? Why is that?
The extreme heat, there's a big factor.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
It can really mess with battery performance and range, And that's not great when you're driving through the desert.
Totally. Range anxiety is already a thing, but in that kind of heat, it'd be a nightmare.
Exactly. And then there's a lack of charging infrastructure.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's just not as widespread and convenient as other parts of the world.
So are they saying like no EVs at all or just not for the masses?
While some luxury EVs are making some inroads, but yeah, the mass market just isn't there yet.
Interesting. So what does the expert think is going to be the winning formula in the Middle East then?
Plug-in hybrids and range extenders.
Okay, so kind of a best of both worlds situation.
Exactly. You get that fuel efficiency and lower emissions of electric when you can, but you have that backup gas engine for longer trips or if you can't find a charger.
So like a stepping stone between traditional cars and going full EV.
Exactly, and it fits perfectly with their current infrastructure and how people drive there.
And hasn't Toyota already been successful with their hybrids there?
They have. There's definitely a proven market for this kind of tech.
Makes you wonder if other companies are paying attention.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing it's not all the same across the entire Middle East, though, right?
You're right. The expert specifically points out some differences between Saudi Arabia and the UAE, for example.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, Saudis still love their sedans,
Okay.
while the UAE is more SUV-focused.
Huh. So even within the region, there are these distinct preferences.
Exactly.
Okay, so what other differences are we talking about?
Well, Saudi Arabia has a much bigger market for those affordable cars
Why is that?
because of their company car programs and rental fleets.
Oh, so there's a big opportunity there for Chinese brands.
Huge, especially for those budget-friendly sedans.
Smart move. All right, but let's get to actually selling those cars.
Okay.
The interview mentions dealerships and this whole thing about strong dragons and local snakes.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
What's that all about?
It's one of the most interesting parts of the whole interview, honestly.
Okay.
The expert talks about how important local expertise and partnerships are,
Makes sense.
even for these huge, powerful foreign companies. And he uses this analogy. He says, a strong dragon doesn't suppress the local snakes.
I love that. So it's not enough to just be a big, powerful company. You got to understand how things work in each country.
Exactly. And that's where dealerships come in.
Right. So you need to find the right partners.
Yeah, people who understand the market, the cultural stuff, and already have those connections.
Otherwise, even a strong dragon could really mess things up.
For sure.
And I bet the interview gives us some examples of this, right?
Absolutely. They do. He specifically mentions MG, that British brand that's actually owned by a Chinese company now.
Oh, right, yeah.
They've been killing it in the Middle East by partnering with those strong local dealerships.
So MG's like the dragon that learned to play nice with the snakes.
Mm.
I like it. Okay. So what about the opposite? Any examples of where things didn't go so well?
Yeah, he talks about BYD, another Chinese company.
Oh, yeah, I know them.
And it seems they had some trouble in Saudi Arabia.
Really? Why? What happened?
It sounds like they kind of underestimated how important that dealership network was.
Interesting.
And maybe they didn't quite get the local preferences either.
So even with a great product, you can't just waltz in and expect to win.
Nope. You need those local experts on your side.
Good point. So besides dealerships, what else do these Chinese companies need to think about when they're going into the Middle East?
Well, adapting to that climate is a big one.
Oh, yeah, of course. It's brutal over there.
Super hot, dusty, and people drive pretty rough sometimes.
True.
So those cars need to be tough, reliable, and have a really good cooling system.
Yeah, you don't want your car breaking down on the desert.
Not at all. What about the tech side of things? We talked about that playability earlier, but is there anything specific that's important for the Middle East market?
Good question.
Voice control is huge.
Oh, yeah, makes sense.
Especially for younger people who are so used to hands-free.
Totally.
Seamless smartphone integration is another big one.
So navigation, music, streaming, all.
Exactly. Even stuff like voice assistants that can control things in the car.
It's all about that connected experience, huh? But I'm guessing there are also some cultural things they need to be careful about, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Actually, he tells this funny story about test drives.
Okay.
So in China, it's normal to have people test drive competing cars back to compare them.
Yeah, I've seen those videos online where they put the cars through all these crazy tests.
Well, that kind of head-to-head comparison is a big no-no in the Middle East.
Oh, really? Why?
It's seen as disrespectful to the brands, almost insulting.
Wow. That's a difference I never would have thought of.
Yeah, so what might work in one country could completely backfire in another.
Totally. So let's say I'm a Chinese car company and I want to break into the Middle East. What's my game plan?
Okay, so first things first, you need to do your homework.
Okay.
Market research is absolutely crucial. You got to understand exactly what people want in each country you're targeting.
Right, because what works in Saudi Arabia might not work in the UAE.
Exactly what kind of cars are popular, what are people willing to pay, what features do they care about most. You got to get really specific.
Don't just assume you know what they want.
Yeah.
Actually ask them.
Right, and once you have that good understanding of the market, it's all about finding those local partners.
Okay.
Could be dealerships, a marketing agency, even government connections.
And remember, strong dragon doesn't suppress the local snakes.
Exactly. You need those experts to help you navigate everything.
So it's more like a team effort.
More of a collaboration than a conquest.
I like that. All right, so we've got the research and the partners covered. What about the cars themselves? Any tips on how to tailor them for the Middle East?
Well, like we said, durability is key.
Right? Got to handle that heat and dust.
Exactly. Make sure those cooling systems are top-notch, maybe even air-conditioned seats for extra comfort.
Oh, yeah. Who doesn't love a cool seat on a hot day?
Right. And don't forget all that tech stuff we talked about, voice control, connectivity, good infotainment systems, it's all got to be there.
Makes sense. And lastly, but definitely not least, that cultural sensitivity.
So important. It's not just about avoiding mistakes. It's about showing respect and really understanding the culture.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Sounds like Chinese car companies have a real chance to make it big in the Middle East. But it's not going to be easy.
Definitely not. It's a tricky market with its own unique challenges and opportunities.
Kind of like those assumptions we had at the beginning about EVs taking over. Clearly, the Middle East is doing its own thing.
Absolutely, and that's what makes it so interesting. This region is like a little snapshot of what's happening in the car industry all over the world.
Yeah, with the Chinese automakers on the rise and the whole question of combustion engines and that need to be culturally aware in a global market.
Exactly. It's a fascinating mix of things that's going to shape how people get around in the Middle East.
Yeah, it really makes you think, if I was running one of those companies, how would I tackle this market?
That is the big question, isn't it? But I think this interview gives us a good starting point. I mean, we've got this crazy situation where gas guzzlers are still on top ho. Hybrids are coming in strong, and EVs are facing a real uphill battle.
You know what really stuck with me? That point about Li Auto?
Oh, yeah.
This Chinese company that's doing so well, and they're really focused on hybrids and what customers actually need.
Right.
It's like they figured out the secret sauce for the Middle East.
Yeah, they're a perfect example of adapting to the market and not just trying to force their own thing.
And it's not just about the car itself, right?
Yeah.
It's the whole package, the partners, the dealerships, the marketing, understanding the culture. It's a lot to juggle.
It really is, and it's always changing, too. Who knows what it'll look like in a few years?
Right. Will EVs finally catch on as charging gets better?
Maybe. Or will some new tech come along and change everything again?
Hard to say. But that's what makes it so exciting, right? You've got China's car industry blowing up the whole world trying to go green, and then the Middle East with its own unique culture.
Yeah. It's a wild mix that's going to determine the future of driving over there.
It really is. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are your takeaways? What surprised you? What are you walking away with?
Maybe you're thinking about EVs differently now and how they're not going to take over everywhere immediately.
Right. Or maybe it's that cultural piece, how important it is to really get it when you're doing business globally.
Whatever it is, hopefully this gave you a new perspective and made you a little more curious about this part of the car world that doesn't always get the attention it deserves.
Absolutely. Thanks for diving in with us. And until next time, keep those wheels turning.